Imagine arriving at work and being treated as invisible. Imagine having your ideas ignored, your abilities questioned, and your presence considered a favor from the company. Now imagine buying that same company and becoming the CEO of everyone who once laughed at you. This is the true story of Madison Carter. A story about prejudice, resilience, and a comeback that wasn't fueled by anger, but by absolute competence. Stay until the end, because what she did in her first minutes as the new owner will give you chills. Madison was 28 when the accident happened. She was a project manager at a tech company in Austin, Texas, a brilliant professional who had built her career with sweat and dedication. With a degree in software engineering and an MBA, Madison was known for delivering above-average results. But life can change in seconds. It was a rainy Friday. Madison was driving back from a client meeting when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact was devastating. 3 months in the hospital, 17 surgeries, and a diagnosis that changed everything, a complete spinal cord injury. Madison would never walk again. The first months were the hardest, not because of the physical pain, but because of the emotional pain of seeing how people changed around her. Friends disappeared. Family members treated her as if she had lost her intelligence along with the movement in her legs. And worst of all, the company where she worked. When Madison returned to work after 6 months of recovery, everything had changed. Her position had been reallocated to another professional. Her responsibilities were reduced to basic administrative tasks. Her salary was cut by 40% under the excuse of a functional readjustment. "It's so you won't stress too much, Madison," said Richard Hale, the HR director, with a smile she would never forget. A smile that said clearly, "You're not useful here anymore." Madison was placed in a small ground-floor room, far from her old team. The important meetings. She was no longer invited. Strategic projects. Nowhere near her hands. She had become the employee the company kept only to check a box. And the worst was yet to come. One Tuesday afternoon, Madison was in the break room when she heard voices from the conference room next door. The door was slightly ajar. She recognized the voices immediately. Her former teammates, including Mark Dalton, who had taken her role. "Honestly, I don't know why the company keeps her," Mark said, laughing. "She's dead weight, sits in her little room pretending to work." "It's true," agreed Julia Price, once considered Madison's friend. "And in client meetings? Imagine us showing up with her in a wheelchair. It makes the company look weak, vulnerable. Clients want to see energy, dynamism." Laughter echoed through the break room. Madison's stomach turned, but she didn't move. She needed to hear everything. "Richard said they'll wait a few months and come up with an excuse to fire her," Mark continued. "But between us, this place isn't for people like that. This is a real corporate environment, you know. We need people who can handle pressure, who can run after things literally." More laughter. Madison left in silence, returned to her room, closed the door, and cried. She cried with anger, humiliation, and helplessness. But when the tears dried, something changed inside her. She would not accept it. She would not become another statistic of a disabled professional pushed out of the workforce. She would do something no one expected. Madison began investigating the company where she worked. Northbridge Technologies was a startup that had grown fast over the last 5 years, but was facing serious financial trouble. The company had investors, but it was burning cash rapidly. The numbers didn't add up. She discovered something interesting. The company was for sale. The founders wanted out and were looking for buyers. The price? $12 million. A fortune for most people, but not impossible. Madison had savings. She had accident compensation. She had market contacts from her high-level work. And she had something her colleagues never imagined. A plan. For 6 months, Madison worked 2 shifts. By day, she pretended to be the apathetic employee everyone believed she was. By night, she built her acquisition strategy. She set up a holding company. She secured angel investors who believed in her potential. She negotiated with banks. She restructured her personal assets. And most importantly, she studied every financial detail of Northbridge. She discovered the company was worth much less than the price. There were hidden debts, ongoing labor disputes, and poorly managed contracts. Northbridge was on the brink of collapse, and the founders wanted to sell before the house of cards fell. She made an offer. $6 million, half up front and half over 2 years, contingent on cleaning up hidden liabilities. Normally it would be rejected immediately, but Northbridge had no other offers. The market already knew the financial problems. Madison was the only interested party, and she knew it. The founders accepted. 3 weeks after signing the papers, a Monday morning looked the same as any other. Madison arrived at 9, greeted the receptionist, and went to her small ground floor room. But that day would be different. At 10 a.m., all employees received an email calling them to an urgent all-hands in the auditorium. The room filled quickly. Madison slipped in quietly and positioned herself in the back, as always. She saw Mark, Julia, Richard, and everyone else who had laughed at her, belittled her, treated her as dead weight. They had no idea what was about to happen. The company's president, Carl Benson, walked onto the stage. He looked tense, uncomfortable. The microphone hissed as he began to speak. "Good morning, everyone. I know this meeting was called at the last minute, but we have an important announcement." He paused and ran a hand through his hair. "As many of you know, we've been facing financial challenges. After much reflection, the founders and I have decided to sell Northbridge." A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Madison watched in silence, heart pounding, her expression perfectly calm. "The good news," Carl continued, "is that we've found a buyer who believes in our potential and has ambitious plans for our future. I'd like to introduce Northbridge's new owner and CEO." That's when it happened. Madison rolled her power wheelchair toward the stage. The auditorium fell into absolute silence. People looked at one another, confused. What was she doing? Why was she heading for the stage? Carl offered his hand and helped her up the side ramp. She took the microphone and, for the first time in 6 months, faced all her co-workers as someone who now had authority over them. "Good morning," Madison said, her steady voice echoing through the room. "For those who don't know my full name, I'm Madison Carter. Some of you know me as the woman in the little ground floor room. As of today, you can know me as the owner of this company." Silence roared. Mark's face went pale. Julia's mouth fell open. Richard choked on his coffee. "I know what many of you think about me," Madison continued. "I know because I heard it. I heard you laugh. I heard you call me dead weight. I heard you ask why the company still kept me. I heard you say that someone like me makes clients see weakness." She paused to let it sink in. "For the last 6 months, while you ignored me, while you laughed about me in the break room, while you excluded me from meetings and projects, I was doing something none of you imagined I could do. I was buying this company." Panic began to flicker across several faces, especially Mark's, Julia's, and Richard's. "Now, let's talk about Northbridge's future. This company has serious problems, management problems, financial problems, cultural problems, and I'm going to fix every one of them." She opened a folder in her lap and started reading. "Mark Dalton, you took over my role when I returned from the accident. Since then, the projects under your leadership have averaged 35% delays. 2 key clients terminated their contracts due to mismanagement. Your team's satisfaction metrics are among the worst in the company. You are terminated for cause, effective immediately." Shock rippled through the room. Mark tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. "Julia Price," Madison continued, relentless, "you were named in 3 separate bullying complaints filed with HR that were quietly shelved. You created a toxic environment in your department, with 62% turnover last year. You are terminated for cause, effective immediately." Julia began to cry, but Madison showed no emotion. "Richard Hale, Director of Human Resources. You illegally cut my salary by 40% under the false pretense of readjustment. You shelved discrimination complaints. You repeatedly violated the Americans with Disabilities Act and state laws. You are terminated for cause and will be sued for disability discrimination. Effective immediately. Richard flushed with rage. You can't do this. I'm going to sue you. You'll do nothing, Madison cut in, her voice ice cold. I have recordings of your break room conversations. I have documents proving your unlawful practices. I have witnesses. If I were you, Richard, I'd leave now and find a good lawyer. You'll need one. Security, already briefed, escorted Mark, Julia, and Richard out of the auditorium. Madison waited until they were gone, then turned to the remaining employees. Now let's talk about the real future of this company. I didn't buy Northbridge for revenge. I bought it because I saw potential that's being wasted by poor management, prejudice, and a toxic culture. She laid out her restructuring plan. New projects, new clients, new markets. But most importantly, a new culture. This company will become a benchmark for inclusion and diversity, not because it's politically correct, but because it's economically smart. Studies show diverse companies are 25% more profitable. Inclusive teams are 35% more innovative. Respectful workplaces have 50% less turnover. She presented numbers, charts, projections. She showed she wasn't just a disabled woman seeking payback. She was a competent CEO with a clear vision. For those who stay, she said, understand this. I will not tolerate discrimination of any kind, not disability, race, gender, sexual orientation, or anything else. What matters here is competence and results. She looked directly at the crowd. And I want something else to be clear. I'm not here to punish everyone for what a few did. Many of you are excellent professionals trapped in a toxic system. Many of you have potential that was never tapped. I want to give you the chance to be part of something bigger. Madison announced raises for undervalued roles, new training programs, flexible work policies, and expanded benefits, including support for employees with disabilities and their families. This meeting is over, she concluded. Take the rest of the day to process everything. Tomorrow, we begin a new era at Northbridge, built on respect, competence, and results. She left the stage to a moment of stunned quiet, then a single clap, then a dozen, and finally a standing ovation. Madison rolled out with tears in her eyes, this time, tears of victory. The first 3 months as CEO were the most challenging of her life, even more than recovery after the accident. Northbridge was in worse shape than she'd imagined. Undisclosed vendor debts, overpromised projects with no capacity to deliver, demotivated teams, and inefficient processes. She hadn't bought the company to quit at the first hurdle. She overhauled everything. She renegotiated debts, winning discounts up to 40%. She canceled unviable projects and focused resources on initiatives with real return potential. She implemented agile management practices learned during her years as a project leader. And the biggest change was cultural. Madison formed a diversity and inclusion council with real authority and budget. She implemented blind hiring, where resumes were evaluated without names, photos, or personal data that could trigger bias. She launched reverse mentorship, where disabled employees mentored executives on accessibility. It changed leaders from the inside out. One of her first moves as CEO was to develop an accessibility platform for companies, born from her lived experience. The software, called AccessWorks, helped organizations make internal systems accessible to employees with visual, auditory, motor, or cognitive disabilities. It was intuitive, easy to deploy, and cost-effective. In 6 months, 20 companies adopted AccessWorks. In a year, 200. In 2 years, it became the U.S. market leader. Northbridge, once at death's door, turned profitable within 18 months. After a small public offering, the stock price tripled in 2 years. But the numbers weren't what mattered most to Madison. It was the daily transformation. Employees who had trudged in listlessly were now energized. Turnover plunged from 62% to 8%. Employee satisfaction rose from 4.2 out of 10 to 8.9. Top talent began flocking to Northbridge, not despite its inclusion policies, but because of them. 3 years after buying Northbridge, Madison received a call from a multinational interested in acquiring the company. The offer, $120 million. She had bought it for $6 million. In 3 years, she had multiplied its value by 20. She faced a decision that would define not just her future, but the future of her people and the accessibility market nationwide. Madison didn't answer immediately. She spent 2 weeks reflecting, talking with her leadership team, and listening to employees. The offer promised lifelong financial security and proved her point. A disabled woman, belittled and humiliated, had built an empire in 3 years. But selling to a corporation might end everything she'd built: inclusion policies, optimized away, culture diluted, access work shelved if profits lagged. She surprised even her closest advisors. She turned the offer down. And more, she announced Northbridge would become a purpose-driven company, dedicating 30% of profits to programs that place disabled professionals in the workforce. "I didn't build this company just to prove I'm competent," she said in an interview that made national headlines. "I built it to change a system, and you don't change a system by selling to people who want it to stay the same." The ripple effects were immediate. Other companies followed suit with serious inclusion initiatives. The idea of a purpose-driven company gained traction. Madison became a national reference in inclusive leadership. 4 years after the acquisition, Northbridge launched AccessEd, a fully accessible e-learning platform for students with disabilities. Built-in assistive tech let blind, deaf, mobility-impaired, and neurodivergent students learn on equal footing. AccessEd was offered free to selected public school districts. The impact was immense. Within 2 years, hundreds of thousands of students gained quality access. Unexpectedly, the product became profitable through premium licenses for private schools and universities. Madison didn't forget Mark, Julia, and Richard. Mark struggled to find work, freelanced for 2 years, then landed a permanent job at a smaller firm with a salary 40% lower than at Northbridge. Julia sued for wrongful termination. The case was dismissed when recordings were admitted as evidence. Richard sued Madison for harassment and abuse of power. After 3 years, the case was thrown out. During that time, he was convicted twice for ADA violations. He never worked in HR again. Madison could have relished their downfall. She didn't. When asked about them in an interview, she said, "I don't think about them. They spent years on hate and prejudice. I won't spend a minute on resentment. The best revenge isn't their fall. It's everything I've built and keep building." 5 years after buying Northbridge, Madison took the stage at the North America Tech Summit before 15,000 people. As she entered, the crowd rose and applauded for 3 full minutes. "Thank you," she said when it finally quieted. 5 years ago, I was a humiliated employee in a little ground floor room. Today, I'm the CEO of one of the fastest growing tech companies in the country. But I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about all of us. She told her story: the accident, the humiliation, the decision to buy the company, the early battles, and the lesson. "The biggest lesson wasn't about business strategy," she said. "It was about humanity. When you're underestimated, you have 2 choices: become bitter and repeat the behavior when you have power, or use the experience to build something better. I chose to build something better." On stage, she announced the Madison Carter Foundation, seeded with $50 million of her personal wealth, to train and employ disabled people in tech. "Anyone with a disability who wants to learn programming, design, data analysis, or other tech skills will have free access to our courses," she said, "and we'll guarantee jobs for every graduate, at Northbridge or partner companies." The room erupted again. She had one last message. To every disabled person watching, here or online, you are not your disability. You are your abilities, your determination, your potential. Yes, the road can be harder. Yes, you'll face prejudice. Yes, you'll want to quit sometimes. But I'm here as proof that it's possible. Not because I'm special, but because I refuse to accept the limits others tried to put on me. If you feel underestimated, excluded, like you're not enough, here's my message. They're wrong. You are enough. You are capable. And one day, when your chance comes, you'll prove it, not to them, but to yourself. The entire auditorium stood again. 15,000 people applauded. Madison cried and didn't hide it. Today, 8 years after buying Northbridge, Madison Carter is one of the most respected CEOs in the United States. Northbridge is now public and valued at over $500 million. AccessWorks is used by more than 3,000 companies in 12 countries. But Madison's greatest success isn't financial. It's lives transformed. The Madison Carter Foundation has already trained and placed more than 2,000 disabled professionals. Their retention rate at partner companies is 93%, far above market averages. Madison married Peter Whitman, a civil rights attorney she met at an inclusion conference. They have 2 children, a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. And the little ground floor room where she was tucked away to be forgotten? She turned it into a memorial. On the wall hangs the nameplate from the door. Madison Carter, administrative assistant. Beneath it, a single sentence. This was the place where they tried to bury me. They didn't know I was a seed. If Madison's story moved you, do something about it. If you have a disability and face workplace discrimination, you're not alone. The ADA protects you. Advocacy groups can help. If you're an employer or manager, rethink your practices. Inclusion isn't charity. It's strategy. If you witness discrimination, don't stay silent. Silence is complicity. Share this story, not to turn Madison into a superhero, but to normalize the obvious. Disabled people are as capable as anyone. Madison Carter is not the exception. She is the rule. The problem is that society insists on treating her as the exception. Let's change that together. Thank you for staying to the end and giving these 30 minutes of your life to hear Madison's story. We live in a world of fragmented attention. The fact that you stayed means you care and that you're part of the solution. This story is based on real events lived by real people around the world. Names were changed, details adapted, but the essence remains true. Every day, disabled people face invisible barriers at work, built not by their bodies, but by other people's minds. And every day, people like Madison prove those barriers can be destroyed. Before we go, one final reflection, something Madison said that sums up her journey. When people ask if I am angry at those who humiliated me, I say no. Anger is too heavy to carry, but I am grateful. If they hadn't underestimated me so much, I might never have felt the need to prove my worth. And in proving it, I discovered it was far greater than I imagined. They tried to make me smaller. Without knowing it, they made me gigantic. Other people's prejudice does not define you. What defines you is how you respond. You can let it break you, or you can use it as fuel for transformation. Madison chose transformation, and that choice changed not only her life, but the lives of thousands. What will your choice be? Thank you for your time, your attention, and your willingness to hear this story. If it inspired you, made you think, or planted a seed of change in you, then every second was worth it. Real change begins with real stories, and real stories need to be shared, discussed, celebrated. Madison Carter bought the company that humiliated her, but what she really bought was her own narrative. She refused to be a victim in someone else's story and became the hero of her own. You can do the same. Wherever you feel underestimated, undervalued, or invisible, you have the power to rewrite your story. It won't be easy, it won't be quick, but it will be worth it. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more stories of strength and transformation. And if you believe the world needs more hope like this, subscribe to the channel. Every story we tell is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light can still rise.